tom@trentovision.tv. The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of the station, its staff, management, or sponsors. Welcome to Trento Vision, where bad ideas get pulverized and the truth will set you free. Trento Vision is hosted by Tom Trento. Tom can be reached at 561-319-5533 or tom@trentovision.tv. Listen and watch every weekday from 3 to 6 p.m. on AM 1470 WNA and trentovision.tv. Now, let's get a peek at Tom's view of the world. Here's Tom Trento.
Oh man, it's a beautiful Friday afternoon, November 23, Boca Raton, Florida, day after Thanksgiving. We're having a wonderful...
Sleepy?
No. How do I say this? We wish everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving yesterday. We know our Mark had a unfortunate situation, death in a family, his wife's mother. I think we had prayed for her a couple of days ago that God's will would be done. They are on their way north to a funeral. If you're so inclined to pray out there, you can do so for our own disembodied voice, Mark. He's on the road right now. But we're having a fascinating, actually, this is like a national security briefing that Claire and myself and others do around the United States of America and other places, but I didn't think we'd be talking about the end of the world. When we get into this information this hour, you know, in all my years as a Christian apologist dealing with issues, I'm very familiar with the eschatology, but when you start seeing Russia in Palestine, wherever Palestine is, in the Gaza Strip, and the activities over the past 2 weeks of the Russians as it relates to the Arabs, which we're going to get into as soon as Claire completes the historic circle of the existence of Hamas in the Middle East, and now the introduction in a dramatic way of Russia. You go, okay, what does all this mean? And you know, if you've ever read the book of Ezekiel or Revelation, even the Jewish scholars look at Gog from the north, some great nation from the north coming down against Israel. And many Jewish and Christian scholars today, through the etymology of the word and the archaeology and historical analysis, say, that's Russia! Oh my word. But anyway, Claire, before we get off to end of the world stuff, and ironically, yesterday, the day before, Fox News had a special they're playing right now on Doomsday, end of the world, primarily with the Mayan calendar, the 21st of December. But there's a sense of anxiety in the parts of a lot of people, what's going on in the Middle East. But Claire Lopez can put us all at ease, because really, with President Obama at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue for the next 4 years...
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong, right, Claire?
Well, I don't know about so right, but let me just really quickly go to the Mayan thing. It just so happens that I was in a museum not very long ago with a wonderful Mayan exhibit, and there was a display about the inscriptions that people look at when they talk about what the Mayans predicted for 2012. And in fact, it's not the end of the world at all. What the actual Mayan inscriptions talk about.
Oh, thank you, Claire. Thank you.
It's a year of change and of importance, but not the end of the world. So forget that part.
Okay, thank you very much. You put us all out. We can go out and buy our toys and everything. Thank you. All right, now, where we left off, let's get to the Hamas being developed, and then CJ has a little information she wants to share with you. And just for background, Claire, who spent 20 years with the agency, Central Intelligence Agency, currently is a fellow with the Center for Security Policy, and Claire spends much of her time traveling around the world, briefing key people and key organizations on key stuff. So you're getting one of those little bit of briefings today, but your primary work, if I'm not mistaken, was on the Soviet Union, wasn't it?
Back in the day, Soviet Union and Russia.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you may have to dust off some of your files and see how they play in today. But bring us into the establishment of the Hamas, which I think was, what, 1986 or so?
88? 87. And, yeah, it was in response to moves to negotiate with Israel, which these particular Arabs who had come to be called Palestinians through the efforts of Yasser Arafat opposed. And so the first Intifada breaks out 87. Then come the Oslo Peace Accords with the thought that by trading land, Israel would obtain peace. Of course, nothing of the sort. The suicide bombings continued, in particular led by by Hamas and the PLO, Fatah, and its offshoots like the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade and so forth. And leading up to the second Intifada, the Al-Aqsa Intifada of 2000, we mentioned the terrible suicide bombings and the Israeli security response, which was the security barrier, which is, by the way, it's only a concrete barrier in a few select locations. Most of it is fencing. And then, of course, the withdrawal from southern Lebanon in 2000, and the withdrawal of all Israelis from Gaza in 2005. Ariel Sharon, the prime minister at that time, again believing trading land for peace would be the best for the Israeli people. Of course, now they have neither the land nor the peace. And many think that withdrawal was a mistake, but I think there's probably no going back at this point. Although the attacks continue to be launched out of Gaza. What has changed now, though, since last year, is that the world has changed. The Middle East, North African region has changed, and in favor of the Muslim Brotherhood. Remember, Hamas is the Muslim Brotherhood in Gaza, or the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. So you now have an Egyptian government in the hands of the Muslim Brotherhood, and can no longer be dependent on as a security partner to Israel. So you've opened up the entire back door, as it were, for the transport of weapons across the Sinai, through the tunnels under Gaza, and brought us to where we are today, which we talked about earlier on the show, the provision of these very dangerous and long-range weapons, missiles, Fajr 5s, coming from Iran. So that's where we are right now.
Yeah, the Fajr 5, F-A-R-J, Fajr Iranian missile. The Katyushas, and for our viewers and listeners, I've mentioned several times on the show that the United West had a contingent of 10 of us travel in February to Israel on a behind-the-scenes intelligence briefing with the IDF, the Border Police, led by Mark Kohlberg. By the way, CJ, Mark will be on, I think, our first hour on Monday to do a complete wrap-up on what's going on from his on-the-ground perspective. And Claire was one of the 10 on that trip. And in Sderot, we saw the Katyusha rockets after they had been exploded. And they're, 6-8 feet tall. We were in the Herzliya Intelligence Museum and saw some of these kind of homemade things. The Fajr, F-A-R-J, Fajr 4 and Fajr 5. Claire, these things are like 20, 30 feet tall. I mean, these are really significant missiles. Now, let me make a distinction. The Katyushas are the short-range rockets, that is, no guidance system, rockets coming out of Hezbollah land in southern Lebanon. Out of Gaza come the Qassams, which were the homemade, shorter rockets, again, unguided, no missile guidance system,
with a fairly limited range that could reach nearby Israeli towns like Sderot. But now we've got the more dangerous ones. The Grads were an extension, longer, bigger, more powerful rockets than the Qassams, and now coming from Iran are the Fajr 5s, F-A-J-R actually, Fajr 5s, which are part of a series indeed, 3, 5, and so forth. They're numbered. The Fajr 5s are very significant in terms of the range which they can reach. In the current exchange, there were some that had gotten all the way towards Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, which is something like about 46 miles or around 75 kilometers. They did this in part by lightening their explosive charge, which sort of defeated the purpose in a way, but demonstrated the range they were capable of reaching. But new and improved versions are on the way, and supposedly they will be able to carry payloads as heavy as 175 kilos.
Phew, 400 pounds.
Explosive charge warheads. That distance of 46 miles or about 75 kilometers. In other words, the point being, these things can now reach the heart of Israel proper.
Yeah, another point, and then CJ, and then what I want to do, Claire, is have you kind of wrap up this move on Israel's part, why they pulled out, and then we're going to switch to, well, not switch, we're going to add into this the Russian element. But a very important point for our listeners and viewers, CJ, at 17 minutes after 5 here in Boca Raton, Florida, on our trip to Israel in February, when we were on the Gaza border at the fence, where you can look a couple hundred yards away at homes, and easily a sniper can hit anybody. And we're up there with Mark Kohlberg, who will be on Monday,
right,
a national security expert from Israel. Mark related the story to us, and we have all of this on video. We'll put some of it out, where he was in the IDF and finished up there, then joined the National Police, which is like the state police here.
Yeah, like state troopers.
Yeah, the whole country. Mm-hmm. He has a jurisdiction over the whole country. And because he's from South Africa, spoke perfect South African English, mm-hmm, and because of his knowledge base and all of that, he became a spokesman for the IDF, for the state of Israel, for Gush Katif,
right,
taking all the Jews out, pulling them out. And I get goosebumps when I relate this story. He followed orders, and he pulled his fellow Jews out of their homes. And we were looking. He was showing us. Remember this, Claire? He was showing us right where the homes were, maybe a quarter of a mile from where we were. And you can see as he's explaining, he sees the soldiers dragging Jews out who did not want to leave. And he said one of his tasks was to close the gate when all the Jews had finally left. When he closed the gate, the realization of what he was doing, pulling Jewish people out of their home, out of their own homeland, hit him so hard that he gave in his badge, basically. He quit at that point and retired. He said, I completed my mission. I do not want to be in a position to pull Jewish people, my people, out of their own homeland when we all know this is a gigantic joke. We're not going to have peace with these people, and we're disrupting the lives of all this. I mean, it was a very moving moment. But Claire, it looks to many of us that Netanyahu was very serious. You don't pull up 30, 40, 50, 75,000 people, all that armament, all that hardware, all the intelligence assets, all the air assets. If you're not going to go in and destroy Hamas, what happened?
Well, we don't actually know. That's the first thing to say. We don't really know. But a ceasefire indeed was reached with the assistance of the Muslim Brotherhood government in Egypt, led by Mohammed Morsi. Mohammed Morsi, of course, a Muslim Brotherhood senior leadership figure. And this involvement by Egypt in brokering the ceasefire between Gaza, Hamas, which is, if you think about it, Hamas is the terror proxy of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, between them and the Israelis, under heavy pressure from the Obama administration, obviously. So you had a ceasefire take place which cut off the possibility of a ground invasion at this particular point in time. The question remains, did Israel achieve the majority of its objectives first? And those objectives would have to be the destruction of the Fajr 5 stockpiles. We know that the factory, we mentioned this earlier, the factory that was making them in Yarmouk, in Khartoum, Sudan, had been destroyed in an aerial raid by the Israeli Air Force in late October already. And those Fajr 5s that had already gotten into Gaza, did Israel destroy most of them, aside from those that, of course, were launched. And thanks to the Iron Dome defensive system, none struck populated areas of Israel. So did they achieve that objective, or did they not? The destruction of Hamas, obviously, would be the logical end sequence of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians in Gaza. But is this the time for it? Is this the right time for it for Israel? Is this the right time to achieve that objective or not? That's
is
a
it
question
even
for Israel to
possible?
answer, and probably Mark will give us some very good insights come Monday when he's on the show. But I think for now the primary objective was those very dangerous long-range missiles. That's what kicked off this current exchange, and that was the #1 objective for Israel, I think.
Yeah, I see that, and I mean we can discuss that. But you don't put 75,000 people out there and tanks and all that stuff when you can do the job from the air. So there's some missing pieces. We'll have to wait for Mark. But let's introduce this Russian element and try to figure this out. Now, for everybody at home, it's 22 minutes after 5 o'clock on the East Coast. I'm your host, Tom Trento, on Trento Vision. CJ is with me in the studio. Mark, the disembodied voice, is not with us today. He's on a personal matter. And we have our good friend and national security analyst expert, Claire Lopez, formerly 20 years with the Central Intelligence Agency, now with the Center for Security Policy, and in Washington, D.C., works out of there as a fellow, and Claire spends a lot of her time doing briefings all over the world, all types of interesting people, places, and things. And CJ, and Claire has her CIA background, dealt with the Soviet Union when that was the primary enemy of the United States in the Cold War. And ironically, Claire, CJ has an academic background in Russian studies, so she's been playing around with what the Ruskies have been doing lately.
What are the Russians up to?
And watch this. Take it away, CJ.
Well, the first thing I want to bring up is the most current, which is that as of today, November 23rd, we have off the coast of Gaza, let's see, just give me 1 second. I want to make sure I read this correctly. Russia sent a detachment of ships of the Black Sea Fleet to the coast of the Gaza Strip in order to evacuate Russians in case of escalation of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, a source in the main command of the Russian Federation Navy said. The detachment of combat ships of the Black Sea Fleet, including the Guards missile cruiser, the patrol ships, large landing ships, the Sea Tug, I'm not naming the names, and a big sea tanker, got the order to remain in the designated area of the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea for a possible evacuation of Russian citizens from the area of the Gaza Strip. According to him, in the course of military service, the crews of the ships will continue their routine combat training, maintenance of equipment and weapons. This is reported by the Voice of Russia. Now, could be a coincidence as far as the Israelis are concerned to know that, gee, not only do we have the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas and Hezbollah and the United States against us, now we got Russian ships off the coast. Who knows what they're doing there? And we've got Russia, China, Iran, all aligned with the pro-Assad regime of Syria and blocking anything that's going to happen in the UN and the Security Council. And for extra added fun, in October of this year, the Sunni Supreme Spiritual Leader Sheikh, you'll have to pardon my pronunciation, Qaradawi, called Russia the Muslims' #1 enemy.
To Islam.
To Islam.
Okay, what else did you find?
So is Russia trying to moderate themselves to appease some kind of serious uprising against the Russians? And what were Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov talking about in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, right before the U.S. imposed a ceasefire on Israel? All linked? All coincidences? What do you think?
Well, I think the first thing to understand is that it has long been Soviet and then Russian policy to use Arab terrorism, Islamic terrorism, as their tool against the West. This has been going on since at least the 60s, if not sooner. So that is of a pattern and of long-standing and continues. But it's a little more complex now because, you know, as you say, the conflict, the recent conflict between Israel and Gaza, brought the ships of a number of nations nearby, standing by to evacuate their nationals if necessary. The United States also sent a couple of warships to evacuate nationals in the case of emergency if needed.
Yeah, but how many Russians do you have in Gaza?
Pardon?
How many Russians are there in Gaza? There's none.
I mean, the Russians have been involved, the KGB and Russians have been involved with Palestinians, the Arabs of the Levant for many, many decades. I mean, that is of long standing. I don't know how many.
Like dozens or?
But the KGB has been the #1 trainer for Arab terrorist organizations, including the PLO, the PFLP, and all the rest of them.
Right.
So that we know from many decades past is the case, and of course they are involved currently. But the Syrian connection is important too that you bring up, and that's because as Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian dictator, fights off an uprising that's been going on now since the beginning of 2011. Obviously, the Russians are deeply interested because they have a port, a warm water port at Latakia, Tartus, it's sometimes referred to, on the Syrian coast. And
right.
If and when Assad goes down, they stand to lose that base. And that would be a serious loss for them because, of course, it's a warm water port, something that Russians have always sought.
Right.
The other thing to note right now, and I think this is extremely interesting, is, of course, with the massive new finds by Israel in the Mediterranean, both on land and under the sea, of huge new gas and oil deposits in Israeli waters and also under Israeli territory. Many interested parties are converging to see if they can get a piece of that pie. And the Russians know no less than anyone else. Gazprom, the Russian
right.
Giant energy conglomerate, has been making interesting overtures to Israel to help them. Yes, help Israel
yeah.
develop its gas and oil fields. They want a piece of that action.
Yeah, so do the Chinese.
It may be that the Russians, as strategically astute as they usually are counting on the loss of the Assad regime, the fall of the Assad regime, and already pivoting to their next move in the Eastern Mediterranean.
Wow. Claire, is Russia, I mean, what is it? I mean, at one point it was a so-called Christian nation. Then the revolution came and it became communist. Then it fell in, 91 or so, and the evil empire. What is the how many people in Russia? A couple 100 million, right? Mm-hmm. What is the typical ideology or belief of the average Russian walking around somewhere in Russia?
If you're talking about the Slavic population, which, by the way, is diminishing by the day,
right?
They are essentially secular. There's a very small population, generally an aging population, which remain Orthodox Christians, which is what
Eastern Orthodox.
The Russian Slavs originally were converted to by the missionaries Cyril and Methodius coming out of Macedonia way back when. But the increasing percentage of the Russian population that is Muslim, the Caucasus, coming out of the Central Asian area, and the now independent republics like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, so forth, that population is growing. And as a percentage of the Russian population as well, it is growing. And so what you're seeing actually is a demographic death spiral of the Russian Slav to the point where probably the population cannot recover. And eventually Russian Slavs will be a minority in their own territory. But so there's the Muslim population percentage,
right.
and the rest are primarily just
this
secular.
is like Mark Stein's theory of what's happening in Western Europe is happening in Russia.
Well,
Could I ask another little Russian question?
Sure, of course.
Okay. Also today, the Russia called on the quartet to work with the Arab League on the Israeli-Palestinian question once this ceasefire gets underway, and basically has abandoned the notion of the quartet taking the lead in any kind of peaceful, quote-unquote, outcomes in Israel with Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. And considering that...
What quartet? Is it like the Four Seasons or the Temptations?
The quartet, the UN, the US, the EU, and Russia.
Okay, the big guys.
The big guys,
okay.
yeah, the big guys that have been trying to impose peace on Israel with unfavorable terms for many years now, has basically, the Russians have basically come out and said, you know what, this isn't working and we need to put the Arab League into it. And why shouldn't they if they put Morsi in charge of administering a peace agreement between a terrorist entity and the lawfully elected government of Israel? How does that work for Israel?
Well, I mean, Israel long has been a minority, that's to put it mildly, in international affairs, certainly in the United Nations, and counted on the United States for a long time, basically since the 1960s, if not sooner, and after the Six-Day War in particular, to be its defender and its ally in the United Nations, and in particular in the United Nations Security Council,
right.
Where the United States still is fulfilling that role. But what you're seeing, of course, in the majority of the United Nations countries is a preponderance of sympathy for Israel's enemies. Now, remember that the next largest international organization in the world, after the United Nations itself, is the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC, which is the head of state organization comprising all of the Muslim countries, 56 of them, plus the Palestinians, makes 57 members.
Right.
And so that is a sizable voting bloc
right.
In the United Nations, together with, as you say, other organizations like the Arab League that typically vote against Israel. So Israel is beleaguered, to say the least.
Unbelievable, unbelievably.
And then if you
beleaguered.
can imagine to add somebody, say, like Samantha Powers into the mix to send her to the UN after you send Susan Rice to the State Department, gosh, if you're Israel, what are you thinking? What are you doing?
Well, let's add one more element to that. Claire, what do you think? Oh, we have Claire Lopez, folks, on the line at 5:35 on a Friday, kind of a lazy, hazy Friday afternoon in South Florida. Is it dark up there yet, Claire? You're up in the...
Don't tell them where she is. Don't tell them no stuff.
You're in the northeast sort of part of town, right?
It's the late afternoon.
Okay, well, we're starting to get a little dark here. What's going on? But...
well, it's 72 degrees.
It is 72 degrees, and there is traffic, so...
And there are several cars on the road.
And my name is Tom Trento, your host on Trento Vision, WNN 1470, and yes, you can make a donation, or you can contact us, Tom at TrentoVision.tv, and we'll give you information to advertise, or we haven't really been taking any calls, because we're just having a fascinating time among ourselves here, trying to get a handle on what's going on in the Middle East for your sake. But if you'd like to give us a call, 888-565-1470, 888-565-1470. We're speaking with Claire Lopez, retired CIA operations officer, currently a fellow with Center for Security Policy. .org, Center for Security Policy.
And her papers are really, really good.
She does great work, obviously, and you can go to that website. They're in D.C., a think tank. Claire, let's see. Hillary Clinton was whisked in on her jet to Ben Gurion, got out, smacked Netanyahu around a little bit, took off, went to Cairo, landed there, and bowed down to President Morsi, and then he negotiates a ceasefire, which is just amazing, a ceasefire. He negotiates a ceasefire, and then she just gushes out with wonder and amazement over her new global partner, Mohamed Morsi, president of Egypt, Muslim brother, who a couple of weeks earlier called for or agreed with at Juma prayer at a mosque, agreed with the destruction of Israel just a few weeks ago, and now he's negotiating with the strongest country in the world, the United States, and its Secretary of State, who's a lame duck, by the way. She's out of here. And she gives him all kinds of praise. And then not 24 hours, he attempts to walk across the Nile River, and because he feels like he's got these immortal capabilities, and declares himself Pharaoh for life. What is that all about?
Well, what we're seeing is the empowerment, not to mention the enrichment and the validation of the Muslim Brotherhood, in particular in Egypt, but also across the Middle East and North African region, primarily driven, or at least I should say primarily aided and abetted and assisted by the United States administration under the presidency of Barack Obama, who came into office, we have to remember, with an agenda to bring the Muslim Brotherhood to power. This fits very neatly into the timeline that is published, has been published for a long time. You can go to Der Spiegel to see a 2005 article about this. The timeline of the Al-Qaeda phased plan
Wait, hang on.
for the reestablishment of
Claire,
the caliphate.
That was in Der Spiegel 2005, the timeline?
Yeah.
We want to look that up. What was the citation?
Hold on one second.
I'll find
try
it
to find
easy.
it for you.
Yeah.
That's a timeline of what?
It is a timeline of the phased plan for the reestablishment of the caliphate by Al-Qaeda and with the assistance of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, it has been long since published, as I said. I'll try and find that for you. You might have to put it up afterwards because I can't lay my hands on it.
Yeah, no
immediately,
problem. We'll
but,
check it out.
the timeline spelled out the phases for the plan. And the phases of that plan had to do with what steps Al-Qaeda and eventually the Muslim Brotherhood would take in order to reestablish the caliphate. Remember, the number one objective for both Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood is the reestablishment of the caliphate and the enforcement of Sharia law. Now, for a long time, Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood had gone about that objective, achieving that objective, with different timelines and different tactics. The Al-Qaeda folks with violence and kinetic attacks, the Muslim Brotherhood through long-term patient infiltration and subversion of governments, working through existing government systems and organizations. Now they've come together. The ideology was always the same.
Right.
Now we're seeing the timeline and the tactics come into synchrony as well. That's what happened when Barack Obama became president. The timeline was reached for the Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood groups to come into alignment and move ahead with what is called Phase 4 in this published timeline. Phase 4, 2010 until 2013, is the overthrow of unfaithful, as they would say it, unfaithful Arab Muslim regimes, secular regimes like the regime of Mubarak, mostly secular, that were not forcibly imposing Sharia law. And so they've achieved that with the active assistance of the United States of America. Okay, this is the important thing to notice. And in Egypt, where we're focused here, over the weekend, as you just said, or the last couple of days, perhaps what I should say, this weekend coming up, Morsi, the Muslim Brotherhood president of Egypt, is moving very quickly to consolidate his power. He already has in his hands executive power. He has taken over the military and all of the security and intelligence organizations of Egypt. He commands the legislative power as well because of the dominance of the Muslim Brotherhood and their Sharia, their Salafist allies in the parliament as elected earlier this year. Now what has happened is he has moved to dominate the remaining branch of government, the judiciary. He has usurped all three branches of power and is now dominant over all of them. There is none to challenge him. I would say this parallels, perhaps at an even more rapid pace, but the consolidation of power in Iran by the Ayatollah Khomeini back in 1979, 80, and 81. Only this is occurring in Egypt in a telescoped, really a rapid sequence. And in particular, this is possible in Egypt because of the assistance of the United States government that backs the Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood movement to take power in North Africa.
This is really, really, really bizarre.
What's in it for us to do that? That's what I don't get.
Well, this isn't about us. This is about the Obama administration. It's certainly not in the interests of the American people or the American national security interests whatsoever. I mean, given, for instance, that the supreme guide of the Muslim Brotherhood, that is their supreme leader, Mohammed Badi, literally declared war on the United States in about October 2010. It took about 9 months after that for our intrepid Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, to grant full diplomatic recognition to the Muslim Brotherhood in the summer of 2011. That was our response to a declaration of war. We might recall the last time that we so callously disregarded a declaration of war by jihadist enemies.
Right.
It didn't end so well for some folks in New York City, the Pentagon, or a plane over Pennsylvania.
Well, can I just ask you this? We have an administration, but we have hundreds of thousands of national security support personnel. We have a military. Does nobody have any influence in the United States except for this small band of people emanating out of the White House and and their enablers in the State Department? Is that it? Is that what the whole country is all about? And we have absolutely no influence over the process whatsoever. In fact, we have the collaboration of the top military and intelligence analysts of this country completely silent and letting it happen.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you use the word process there, CJ. This has been a process of many decades. Just as in Egypt, the coup against the Mubarak regime and against the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces did not actually occur overnight as it might have appeared to, but there too was a process of many decades. Here in the United States, it's a process of decades for the Muslim Brotherhood to infiltrate our society, our government, our intelligence agencies, and the top national security circles of this country. But that's what's happening, and that is why you see American national security policy turned on its head. It seems to be all of a sudden, but recall, the Muslim Brotherhood has been active in the United States since shortly after World War II.
Of course.
This is merely the culmination,
Right.
or at least we're moving towards the culmination of Muslim Brotherhood's seizure of influence in national security circles as regards the Middle East and Islam in the United States.
And a very good micro illustration of that, the macro, and the Team D people go nuts. I mean, like, what is going on here? You know, and there are books have been written that...
Okay, but these are all experts. These are people who have 400 years of experience and knowledge. I am not,
and
I see it. So, you know, if it's hitting me, how could it not hit people smarter?
In the micro, a great illustration of this influence operation that the Brotherhood has been putting on is manifests itself in a young, attractive woman who, while she was at George Washington, was on the social committee of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Right.
Actually, even before that. Her mommy and daddy took her to Saudi Arabia.
Right.
And she had a little bit of training there, came back, went to George Washington University, was on the Muslim Brotherhood social committee, then decided to do a little internship at the White House, and worked for Hillary Clinton, the First Lady. From there, Hillary went to New York, became a senator, this young, attractive woman, then worked for Hillary in New York. And then when Hillary came back to Foggy Bottom, she took her young, attractive female friend under her wing, and Michelle Bachmann simply wanted to know, who is Uma Abedin? And she's the confidant of the Secretary of State of the United States of America. Who is this woman, and has she ever passed a background investigation?
Right.
And Michelle Bachmann sits on the Select Intelligence Committee, and her job is to ask these questions. And the legislature, Marco Rubio from Florida, castigated her.
Yeah.
McCain threw her under
McCain
the bus.
and Graham. I mean, they all did.
This stuff is incomprehensible, and that's why we do this radio show, to try to, to take these scabs off and, get some air under this thing and try to bring some sense to what's happening, because it's tough stuff, and it's getting worse.
Well, what I wonder is, how many Americans are going to have to die on American soil? How many millions of people worldwide are going to have to die not on American soil in order for us to finally get it? What do you think the number is? Because obviously 3,000 people killed on 9/11 in this country wasn't enough to wake anybody up.
You watch all these 24 shows, 24 and Homeland and all that, and the bad guys have 10 suitcase nukes in 10 major cities, and they're all going to go off in one day. Well, if something like that ever happened, of course there'd be tremendous amount of anger and patriotism, and particularly from the southern states. But also there's going to be a phenomenal movement to stop whatever caused these people to blow up 10 of our cities, get out of wherever we are, leave them alone, let them do whatever they need to do, and let's just take care of ourselves, build bridges, have shovel-ready projects, have more food stamps. There's going to be a massive movement to disassociate ourselves from these people who are killing us as a solution to the problem when it only aggravates and enhances the problem.
Except for we're actually going out of our way to import them from everywhere else in the world and place them in the hearts of American communities.
We're on the eve of destruction here. I don't know. Do you see any hope, Claire Lopez?
You know, what I would say is that as terrifying as all of this kinetic threat may be, and I don't mean to downplay it, I think that is the lesser of the threats facing us. The most important threat, because it is more insidious and because it flies under the radar in many cases, is the threat posed by the Muslim Brotherhood of stealth jihad or civilization jihad, as the Muslim Brotherhood puts it in its own document. It is the jihad that has taken over our senior foreign policy circles to the point that without violence, except of course as fallout from 9/11, the original 9/11, which instigated feelings and reactions of appeasement, but the takeover of our national security infrastructure flew under the radar, and it has now turned the Middle East on its head. That didn't happen because there were dead Americans or attacks in America or bombs going off in America. That happened because the Muslim Brotherhood infiltrated our national security infrastructure.
Exactly.
And that is the way it could go for the United States as well. Not with kinetic attacks. Our national security and law enforcement agencies are pretty good, as we've just seen in California, at interdicting these kinds of plots. That's not the problem. The problem is the insidious infiltration of our society, our legal system, and our national intelligence organizations.
Exactly.
By the Muslim Brotherhood.
Exactly. This is what softens up General Petraeus for a stupid coin policy.
Yep. Hey, Claire Lopez, we got to thank you very, very much for spending a Friday afternoon with us, going through this material.
After Thanksgiving Day.
Extremely informative, helpful, and I know the viewers and listeners appreciate it. Thank you. We want you to have a wonderful, relaxful weekend, okay?
Thank you so much for everything.
All right, we're all waving goodbye, even Invisible Mike.
I'm looking at her.
Oh, you're looking at her. Okay.
Bye-bye.
See you, Claire.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Wow. Tom Trento here on TrentoVision.tv and on the radio side, WNN 1470 at 53 minutes after 5 o'clock. We only have a couple of minutes left in the show. We had several people on. Oh, by the way, Barry Shaw just wrote and apologized. His power went out. He had people all over the world, he said, ready to tune in. His network of people to listen to him. Yeah.
Do you think they listened anyway, even though he wasn't there?
They probably did. Hello, everybody. From
Hi,
Barry
everybody
Shaw.
who listened for Barry Shaw. We'll get you next time.
I got a shout out to my cousin Jimmy, who's not a nitwit. His brother is, but Jimmy in in Pennsylvania now. How you doing, man? He watches quite often.
Okay.
And his nitwit brother is just...
I'll shout out to Guy.
Okay.
I love Guy. Guy, I love you. We're family.
Okay, so CJ, you got 30 seconds.
Okay, here's what I want to find out next week.
Right.
Okay, after the Israelis have finished investigating the military hardware that landed in their country last week, I want to know how much of it came from Benghazi.
Very good point. And what we'll do, because we're tying all of this together, next week we'll bring Benghazi back in, because as Andy McCarthy said, as I said earlier, the Benghazi cover-up has the potential to take this president down under a complaint, a cause of action of impeachment, because he lied. He lied to the United States. He lied to there's a whole bunch of reasons. But we'll get into it.
I think the U.S. is getting blackmailed by all these so-called peace partners of the Middle East who aren't Israel to out them about their role in what they did in Libya.
Next door to Libya is a country called Egypt, and Mohammed Morsi, when he declared himself basically Pharaoh for life. Not quite that, but take a look at it. A bunch of sort of Democrat-minded citizens are now revolting and burning down the Muslim Brotherhood offices. That's not going to last long. No. He's going to clamp down on that.
Yeah.
Well, we want you to clamp down on 1470, push a preset in your radio, iHeartRadio. You can listen to us anywhere, 3 to 6 every day. And TrentoVision.tv. All of these shows are archived. You can go watch them every night, and you should. You should watch everyone. There's going to be a test. The test will be... The test will be...
A pop quiz.
A pop quiz next week. And we did get a caller answer the question right. Black Friday, to be in the black, make your money.
Black, right.
But have a white weekend, a wonderful weekend. Saying goodbye. Our prayers are with Mark and Jess. But from CJ, Mike, myself, everybody else, Kenny in the booth. We will see you on Monday, ladies and gentlemen. Goodbye.
Thanks for tuning in to Trento Vision, where bad ideas get pulverized and the truth will set you free. Tom Trento can be reached at 561-319-5533 or tom@trentovision.tv. And tune in again weekdays from 3 to 6 p.m. on AM 1470 WNN. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of the station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
This is Steve Kane, and for some time now I've become concerned my memory is not what it used to be. Now I know that a degree of memory loss is a natural part of the aging process, but as my lapses became more frequent, I began to worry this was something more serious. As my anxiety began to increase, I did a little research and found Lifespan Health Services in Boca, where they offer complete memory testing